So first name's Luke, second name's Ross. I answer to either because I just appreciate any form of attention, because I am actually a registered psychologist, but in the way of self-disclosure, so is my mum, so is my wife, so is my auntie, so is my uncle, and my dad was an entrepreneur. And so what we're going to be talking about is we're going to be talking about organisational psychology. So I'm not a clinical psychologist, so I can't help with deep-seated psychological issues. I mean, I can give it a go. I'm just not saying I'd be any good at it. And what I'm going to give you today is I'm going to give you some really simple, practical skills how to decide to be resilient. This program, we're doing a 1 hour snippet of a 1 day program. So we're giving you an introduction with one of the core skills. And this program, it's actually an evidence-based program that's in 18 languages and with 32 different country norms. So it's used across the globe in a number of our large corporate organisations. We've also launched this program for grade 6 and year 9 kids. Because here's the fascinating thing about resilience. Resilience absolutely is learned, and it is a decision, and it is situational. And interestingly, what we're doing in our school-based environments at the moment, and also in our society as a wider perspective, we are reducing the opportunities for kids to learn to be resilient. We're making things so safe that they don't learn to be resilient. And I had a fantastic trip up this morning from Melbourne, because I sat beside this guy called Harry. He was a Finnish guy, and what his job was, he was running a business, and what he does is he implements and builds risk-based playgrounds. How cool is that? So what's now happening is playgrounds went through the process where they became so safe that no one could hurt themselves, that schools are now saying, you know what, we need to engage our kids in risk-based play to give them the opportunity to build resilience. So they're getting rid of the playgrounds with 7 inches of tan bark and climbing things that are only 1 foot high, and they're putting in parkour. Amazing. So we're going to be seeing kids potentially playing parkour, and then they're doing something even more revolutionary. They're getting rid of segregated generational playgrounds. What I mean by that is the grade 1 kids might play on the same equipment as the grade 6 kids and learn how to manage it. Because what we know with resilience is all of those difficulties that we have in our lives actually give us the opportunity to build resilience. So if a grade 6er is coming up and giving a kid a hard time, it now gives that grade 1er the opportunity to learn how to deal with it. Because here's the reality, as you all know well, when you leave school, there is no one really standing beside you and protecting you. You are faced with adverse environments every single day, and some of your colleagues create those adverse environments. We actually learn how to deal with that during school. Here's the fascinating thing. Everyone in this room was teased at school at some point. Teased, not bullied, big difference. And that teasing is what gives you the opportunity to learn how to deal with teasing in adult life, which we call organisational politics. It's a key skill to learn in the playground, right? And so because what's happening with bullying, and I'm totally against bullying, but there's a lot of teasing that gets labelled as bullying, which is not bullying, and it gets removed, and the kid who gets teased, unlike you, doesn't have the opportunity to learn how to deal with it. So this is this really important thing about resilience, and I'm going to ask you to make some brain shifts today. It's about facing directly into adversity and hugging it and loving it. You've got to feel sorry for my kids though. With 2 parents as psychologists, I recently took this a little bit literal, and I'm pretty hard on my kids because I want them to be able to survive in the world, which is only getting more challenging. And my daughter Charlotte, she was on camp last week, and it was a mountain biking camp. I wish I had that sort of camp when I was at school. Anyway, she was on a mountain biking camp and she fell off her bike. She got her shoelace wrapped around her pedal. She fell over sideways, whack, straight into her elbow onto rock. And the camp supervisor said to Charlotte, "Oh, don't worry about it, it's just homesickness. Keep riding." Here's what I got a little bit concerned but proud, but proud. Charlotte kept riding for another day because there was only 1 day left of the camp. She'd actually broken her arm. So a little bit concerned, but also pride. A little bit concerned, but also I was like, am I being too hard on these kids? Whoa, I don't know. But isn't that the joy of parenting? You second guess yourself every second of the day. And you can just imagine two psychologists. I was listening to the first 2,000 days of life. And if I look at the first 2,000 days of life of my first child, you had two psychologists who thought they knew everything, who knew nothing. Right? And we thought we had a demon baby. What we actually had was crappy parents. They had no idea what was going on. So here we go. This is what we're going to talk about. Develop an adaptive mindset for resilience. Recognise your personal cognitive and behavioural reactions to adversity and how it has an effect on your behaviour. Identify your own cognitive and behavioural strengths and learn some practical strategies. Okay, so I'm going to ask you the strangest question all day. And if you know the answer to this one, don't yell it out. Which would make you happier? Winning the lottery or becoming permanently disabled? All right, so put your hands up for permanently disabled. That's good. That was our first of our psychological assessments. So I once had someone say, well, what sort of disability? And I went, okay, let's play. Okay, I said, okay, you lose the use of both legs. And this participant sat there for a little while. And he said, yeah, I think I'll take permanent disability. I said, please explain your rationale. And he said, well, you get to sit down all day. I said, seriously, dude? You've got some incorrect perspectives here. Here's what the research actually shows. Within 12 months of becoming permanently disabled or winning $1 million in the lottery, your level of happiness will be the same. Because we have what is known as a happiness set point. So, if I now tell you a story about, and I've met many people who've become permanently disabled, and I've met many people who've won the lottery, and the science stacks out. Of course, research is research, there's always exceptions, but this is the general trend that we see. Sometimes in research, this is called the hedonistic treadmill. It's actually an adaptation technique. We actually adapt to difficulty and great things in our life to come back to a level of functioning. So, personal story. So, for those of you in the front row just here, you might see I have one slightly strange eye. I got a compliment on the other day. Someone said, it looks very David Bowie-esque. I went, oh, yeah, I'll take that. Here's what actually happened. 23 years ago, I put a piece of metal straight through the centre of that eye. Cut the lens in half and burn a couple of holes in the retina. I then had a intraocular lens implant, and they did a number of suturing on the front of the retina, and things were pretty good. Things were hunky-dory for a little while. And then about 7 years ago, things started going a little bit sideways. First of all, the retina fell off, so you had to do another retinal attachment. That was fun. And then the cornea started really packing up. And so we did a corneal graft. That was fun. We then decided to do some iris suturing to join the coloured bits back together. That wasn't so much fun. And I've actually had 15 operations on that eye. So proper operations, right? And at operation 15, which I think was the third glaucoma type treatment, got Zen stents in there and blebs and all sorts of stuff, for those of you who know what that is. Anyway, I was sitting there in the chair, and the sight post-op was not looking like what it normally looked like. And my eye surgeon, who's a great guy, he sat down and he said, Luke, he said, unfortunately with eye trauma, it's a bit like chasing grass fires. Once you fix one thing, nothing happens. And he said, and trauma is the gift that keeps on giving. Unfortunately, you've had catastrophic vision loss in that eye. You have lost every single bit of vision, and you're never going to get it back. So for a number of years, I actually had extraordinary pain in this eye as the cornea was decompensating, as things were falling apart. It still hurts to this day. So I'm sitting there in the chair. This is my moment of adversity. I've got a pretty good life, but this was a minor moment of adversity in the scheme of things, but a big moment of adversity for me. I've completely lost the use of that eye. And so I'm sitting there saying, is that all you've got, surgeon? Trauma's the gift that keeps on giving. And in reality, in 12 months, we're going to take it out and I'm going to have a fake one. That's where we're at. So, of course, within that first couple of weeks, I went down into a trough. And then I slowly crawled out of that trough to where I am now. It's about 18 months. I was the eye surgeon yesterday. It's actually behaving itself for the moment, but it's a week-by-week proposition. The flip side of the story. My mum, the psychologist, who lives in Narooma, for those of you who know where Narooma is, She was at the Narooma Bowls Club playing keynote. About the same time, she pulled off $1 million win. This is a true story. And the amazing thing is she just survived breast cancer. And she said, I'm not having chemotherapy, I'm having kenotherapy. Right, she thought she was really funny. You know, I went, yeah, good one, Mum. So anyway, so here's what happened. Her happiness went through the roof. She hit the cruising circuit like you wouldn't believe, right? And we're not talking swipe right cruising, we're talking boats, okay? She was cruise after cruise after cruise after cruise until I had a conversation with her a little bit the other day when I know she had returned to her happiness set point when she said, Luke, you know what? $1 million just doesn't go that far. Right, are you serious, Mum? Right. Most people, when I tell this story, they have one question in their mind, which is, did she give you anything? That's what most people, not a cent. And I am 100% fine with that because I want her to go and spend it on herself. And she still has a little bit left over because at the moment she's on a 119-day world cruise. Right. But her happiness set point has returned to normal. She thinks that's normal. So, it wouldn't be a session with a psych if we didn't blame our parents for something. Right. So here's the deal. You're possibly wondering, where does my happiness set point come from? The research is a little bit varied, but the rough sort of indication is this. 50% of your happiness set point comes from your parents. So you can blame them. If you're a miserable git, you can blame them for the moment. So roughly 50% of your happiness set point's a little bit sort of hardwired for all intents and purposes. 10% of it comes from external things. Your job, your relationships, houses, level of wealth, all those sorts of things. It's only 10%. It's actually really, really small. Here's the most important thing. 40% of it comes from how you think and act. So you can increase your happiness set point if you change how you think and act, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So my 14-year-old daughter, Charlotte, who believes she is the font of all wisdom in our house, actually provided something really good the other day. She said to me this saying that I've now heard many, many times. She said, Dad, you do you, boo. And I went, that's pretty cool. Because here's what it means. That's what today is all about. You do you, boo. If you want to increase your level of happiness in your lives, if you want to truly engage in some self-care, you do you, boo. Look at how you think and act. The less that we look at other people and how they think and act, and the more that we look at ourselves, the happier we'll actually make ourselves, the more life satisfaction we will enjoy. And happiness, I'm not talking surface level happiness, I'm actually talking life satisfaction. So, let's now look at how you can do you, boo. Okay, so here's what resilience is. It's learned, it's a daily decision. It's situation dependent, not stable. It's about your mindset. It's deciding to see adversity as an opportunity, and this is really hard. With the complete loss of all vision in this eye and the pain that I actually have right now, I have to actively decide to see this eyeball as an opportunity. Here's what I do with it now. I use it as a social experiment because we don't realise how much we use our peripheral vision. And I'm a mad keen observer of social behaviour, and some of the social behaviour I find most hilarious is travel-based behaviour on planes. So here's what happens on a plane. Because I'm blind in this side and I can't see anything that's going on that side, I put myself in the alpha row. I'm not talking alpha male, because by the way, this at the moment is the least popular demographic on the planet, white middle-aged male. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is I put myself in the A row, right? Because I park my blind side because then I can see everything else that's going on in there and I don't get hit in the head with bags and all that sort of stuff. But here's what happens. Every now and again I'll get on an earlier flight and I'll be in the other row. And I was on this flight and I was on the aisle seat. The aisle was just here, so blind side to the aisle. So people walk on the plane, walk on the plane, and then they come up and they stand right beside you, which to me is my complete blind side. Everything is a surprise out that side. Right, I have no idea what's going on out that side. So anyway, so this fellow passenger was walking up and they come up and they do the I'm in the window seat dance. And the I'm in the window seat dance sort of goes like this. Right, bit of jazz hands, a little bit of spirit fingers, right? And then you do the appropriate response, which is the silent And they go, and you go, which means I'll get up, right? And so you get up, they walk in and they sit down. This is the plane etiquette. This is how we exist in this cooperative society of this microcosm of the plane. But I don't play by those rules anymore because I don't know what's going on that side. So I was sitting there being the least popular demographic on the planet, right? And in walks another passenger. And they're standing beside me in my blind side. I have no idea what's going on. They're doing I'm in the window seat dance. And I don't realise. I'm not playing by the rules. I'm looking down there sitting and looking like an arrogant male businessman. And I hear this voice from on high. What, am I going to have to step over you? And I went, I'm so sorry, I'm totally blind in that eye. I had no idea you were there. What do you think the response was? No. Yeah, whatever. And we almost got this. Right? Right. At that moment, I had a choice to see this as an opportunity for a fight, opportunity for a flight, or am I actually going to control myself? I decided not to do anything and let it go, because here's the deal. I'm going to make myself happy. If I actually fought back, which I was really, really wanted to use my favourite line, which is don't pick on the disabled. Not that I see myself as disabled, but I wanted to make someone feel bad, right? I could do that. As soon as I did it, I feel bad about it myself, right? And I'd be sitting there holding this for the entire plane trip, or I can make a decision and go, that's okay, and absolutely let it. Me do me boo, right? Because she's going to sit there and it's going to dawn on her what actually happened, and she's going to have an uncomfortable plane trip. I'm going to be absolutely fine, knowing I've got an awesome story to tell my next audience. So, let's do something weird, shall we? Okay, here's what I'm going to do. When I say go, I want you to stand up and directly stare at the person beside you. Turn and face. Want full body not yet. Hang on. So you're going to stand and you're going to stare at each other, not in the eyes, because that's weird and it's not that sort of workshop. So stand and stare at each other, and then let's ramp it up a bit more. Look each other up and down. Drink them in. Take into account everything they're wearing, and then I'm going to yell out, turn away, change one thing, and then I'm going to yell, turn back, and try and work out what it is. Okay, stand up, let's get weird. Let's stare at each other. We're going to do it for 30 seconds. Okay, staring starts now. Drink them in. All right, turn around and change one thing. Turn around, change one thing. All right, turn back and try and work it out. All right, grab a seat. All right, so that activity, so people get really competitive in that activity. That activity has nothing to do with observation. What this activity does is it gives us a beautiful insight to how most of us respond to adversity or change. The first thing I did is I crossed a number of social norms from a psychological perspective. It is not socially appropriate to stand close to someone you don't know that well and stare at them up and down for 30 seconds. So what that did is, as I started telling it, I started seeing people, so I'm going to get you to pair up. People's level of discomfort went, and I'm going to get you to stare at each other. And look each other up and down. Drink each other in. Right, then I got you to do it. And this is what we see in the behaviour when everyone started doing it. They go, oh, I can't do it. Oh, I can't do it. And then some people are hiding themselves and rotating away from each other and all this sort of stuff. It's uncomfortable. It's awkward. It creates a degree of apprehension. This is the first thing about understanding how you build your resilience. When you are facing adversity, challenge, change, your first feeling is going to be apprehension, mild anxiety, discomfort. Love it. Hug it. The human being is designed to create equilibrium and avoid it. It takes a conscious decision to say, no matter what is happening to me, I'm going to expect and embrace this discomfort. The next thing that happened is I asked you to turn around and change one thing, and most people took something off. Most people take a name tag off, a watch off, a ring off, or a shoe. Different workshop. And so that's the next thing that replicates our mindset to adversity and change. We think, our default mindset is we think we are going to lose something. We're going to lose comfort, power, status, value, predictability, income, stability, whatever it is, right? We think we're going to lose something. So most people, when they're exposed to adversity and change, they say change equals loss. And this thinking is just below the level of our awareness. Make it conscious, and no matter what happens to you, tell yourself this. Hug the discomfort and say change equals gain. If you simply adopt that as a mantra, no matter what happens to you, like with my eyeball, if I just go, this is gain, this is gain, this is gain, what it does is it transforms your response to things. You transform your bodily response and you are going to manage it better. But it takes conscious effort, because our default unconscious thinking is, I'm going to lose something here. The next one is, it would have been really weird if you actually asked someone else to help you take off your name tag and lanyard. It would have felt unnecessary. This is the second mindset we change. Most people think change is something they have to muscle through themselves. You don't. Absolutely ask other people for support. So post-op, it was probably about 12 months ago, I was doing a big keynote like this, and my eye was actually looking like meat pie and sauce. Right? It was really not looking good. And I was talking to Amanda, I said, listen, I think I'm going to have to wear the pirate patch, because I have a black patch, because it makes other people uncomfortable sometimes when the eye looks a bit ordinary. And normally I can carry off the patch, but I dropped into this trough of feeling self-conscious. And I said to Amanda, my darling wife, we've been together forever. We got together when she was 16 and I was 17. And so we've known each other obviously a long time. I said to her, look, I just don't think I can do the pirate patch today. I feel really self-conscious. I feel kind of stupid. And she said to me this one phrase, and this is what we need to surround ourselves with people who help us in the way that we need to be helped, which is very different to surrounding yourself with people who just want to help themselves by helping you. That's a very different thing, right? That's the third thing with this response to change. Surround yourself with people who can tell you the stuff you need to know to help you change, and it is not always what you like to hear. Don't surround yourself with people who just reinforce your own view, because that's not helpful. So be the person who embraces change/adversity. Don't be the casualties, the rejecting change, the hating change, the avoiding change. Be that person who, no matter what happens, you hug it. And for those of you who've got kids, this is critical to teach them. Get them to stand up and face into adversity. All right. Shortly what I'm going to do is I'm going to put up a face on the screen. And what I want you to do is I want you to think about what are the emotions that you see expressed on this person's face. And I'll ask a few people to yell them out. Okay, good to go? All right. Confusion. What else we got? Worry. Yep. Critical thinking. What else? Thoughtful. Yep. Frightening? Well, I think it was frightening. I didn't tell you, one thing I didn't tell you is all that time in the army, I was in one place at the wrong time and I stuffed this ear, so I've got a hearing aid in this ear, so sometimes I can't hear that well. But it is awesome for arguments. Because if I ever disagree with someone's viewpoint, all I need to do is this. And the world is gone. Okay. One of the other benefits of losing your eyesight is half the traffic is gone on the road. Extraordinary. Okay. What else have we got? We got worry, concern, anger, confusion, frustration, critical thinking, pensive. They're the sorts of stuff that normally comes up. This image is from a famous research piece. This is not actually a real face. It's a computer composite. It is designed to be absolutely neutral. But here's what the brain does. It sees it as neutral first, and then for 60 to 70% of people, it then defaults to inserting negative emotions. And we call this the negativity bias. Now, the negativity bias is radically different from a negative person. Everyone in this room, apart from a few select people, generally will have a negativity bias. It actually has a survival element to it. So the key thing to think about this negativity bias, it has a survival element, and it's in the absence of information, our brain will default to seeing negative things. And there's more evidence of it. So we're hardwired to actually focus on negative, unpleasant things, even when they're neutral. It's evident in our language. There's 558 words that relate to emotion. 70% of them relate to negative emotion. We see it in brain function. We see it in functional MRIs. There are countless research pieces where they go and show someone negative and positive stimulus or images, and we look at the brain function. The brain lights up significantly more when exposed to negative stimuli. And then the kicker on the end, on average it says there, people experience 3 times more positive events compared to negative ones. But the negative ones are the ones that capture your attention at the end of the day. How often at the end of the day do you sit there going, that was great, that was awesome, I did that really well, I nailed that, I did this, woohoo, right? To yourself. I'm not talking to other people because that's American. Versus how often do you ruminate and play through the things that didn't go as well as you wanted them to go? It takes a conscious effort to understand this negativity bias. And if we look at news, various news bureaus try to do positive news stories, but they don't last. They don't rate. If you look at reality television, the reality television shows that actually rate are the ones that have carnage. It's not the ones that have really good, positive, happy endings. We could do a whole session on Married at First Sight. So, why do we have this negative bias? Well, we have the brain science from the Croods. We're going to watch a very quick clip which will explain why we actually have it.
My name's Eve, and this is my family, the Croods. If you weren't clued in already by the animal skins and sloping foreheads, we're cavemen. Most days we spend in our cave, in the dark. Night after night, day after day. Yep, home sweet home. When we did go out, we struggled to find food in a harsh and hostile world. And I struggled to survive my family. We were the last ones around. There used to be neighbors. The gourds, smashed by a mammoth. The horks, swallowed by a sand snake. The earths, mosquito bite. Frogs, common cold. And the Croods, that's us. The Croods made it because of my dad. He was strong, and he followed the rules. The ones painted on the cave walls. Anything new is bad, curiosity is bad, going out at night is bad, basically anything fun is bad. Welcome to my world.
That was too close.
I was watching, I was fine.
What were you doing up there, Eve?
I don't know.
What were you looking for?
Nothing.
Well, then why did you go up there?
I don't know.
Why don't you know? Stop looking for things. Fear keeps us alive, Eve. Never not be afraid.
So that's the key thing, is this negativity bias absolutely kept us alive. When the daughter does this, it just reminds me of my daughter a lot, for those of you who got teenage daughters. So it absolutely had an evolutionary basis. If we had a positivity bias, we wouldn't have survived as a species. Because if you walked into a cave and you heard this low, rumbling growl, and you went, that's a lovely pussycat that wants to talk to me, you were lunch, right? But if you said, I don't know what that is, I'm going to run away from it, flight, or I'm going to go into a fight response, well, that's what enabled us to survive as a species. We don't have saber-toothed tigers anymore, but we absolutely have things that pull the amygdala trigger, which is what I'm going to talk about next. Okay, so bit of brain science, which is always fun for a medical group. Most people know this. So what we have there is the one-dimensional view of the brain. That's not really how the brain works, but for ease of explanation, it works for us today. We have the limbic part of our brain, which is, you know, the sort of second part of our brain that came across. It's really responsible for our fast emotional processing. And then we have prefrontal cortex, which is our bit of our brain that developed a little bit later, which is responsible for slow rational thought. Just at the base of the limbic system, we have the amygdala, right? And the amygdala is where we see all of the electrical activity when we're confronted with positive and negative stimuli from a fight or flight response. And we've all heard of the phrase the amygdala trigger. That's when we just react, right? It's an instinctive reaction, and it's really, really, really fast. And as I said, we do not have saber-toothed tigers in the world anymore, but this part of our brain is still alive and kicking, and it explains a lot of why we get into difficulty with our lives, and understanding this is the key to building your resilience. So, these are the triggers. These are our saber-toothed tigers today. Lack of respect. When you feel like you are treated with a lack of respect, you might have gone into someone's house if you're in home care for some degree, and they just treat you like crap. You are there trying to do a really, really good job for them, and they treat you like crap. But here's the key thing to be aware of. But they are completely justified. They are actually completely correct, but not helpful. And this is where this resilience stuff comes in. It's like doing a one-arm push-up. Understanding amygdala triggers, you can be 100% right in your response, but it does not help you achieve what you want to achieve. It does not build your life satisfaction. It doesn't build your happiness. It takes a conscious decision not to let your trigger get pulled. You might not be respected for your expertise. Surgeons in the room, if we've got any, you will be often pulling this trigger unintentionally with your non-clinical staff. Because surgeons sometimes treat people with a lack of respect and they don't even realise they're doing it. And they wonder why they create difficulties for themselves from an interpersonal perspective in hospitals. Right, unfair treatment. When you are treated differently to other people. Next one. Underappreciated. When you work incredibly hard to deliver something and then you get crickets, you wanted at least a little bit of a thank you and you get nothing. Not heard. When you get the courage to confront someone, to talk up, to give your honest feedback, and you get shut down. And I want you to think about these from a professional perspective, but also a personal perspective. If you're not feeling heard in your relationship, that will absolutely pull a trigger in your personal relationships. If you're not feeling appreciated in your personal relationships, it'll absolutely pull a trigger. And this is like that Alcoholics Anonymous moment. As you know, my name is Luke Ross and my amygdala trigger is lack of respect. Because when you actually own the trigger, don't demonize it because you're human. These triggers are there. It's not about eradicating the trigger. It's about understanding when it gets pulled and deciding to respond differently after it gets pulled. Unrealistic deadlines. More on top of more on top of more on top of more on top of more until you crack and you fight the person whoever gave you the last thing. And not being included. This is a fascinating one. I watched this one come to life in my daughter's friendship circle in grade 1. Girls, we know from the research, girls develop interpersonally far faster than males, and in many ways they're far more advanced on the interpersonal side, but there's a double-edged sword to this. It makes them politically gifted. And they start using these politics in the playground from a really, really early age by exclusionary and inclusionary behaviour. You can't come with us because you're not my friend. Or they do the runoff and they make people chase them. It's fascinating to watch. And interestingly, as we see more females coming into leadership groups, this is some new stuff that's coming up, and this is just stuff to think about for female leaders in the room. We are seeing the occurrence of girls' clubs. We used to have boys' clubs in leadership teams where all the boys would basically put on what we call the AFL or the NRL voice. So you could have a Queen's Counsel or a top surgeon who almost speaks with a plum in their mouth, but as soon as they start talking about footy, right, we call that the NRL or the AFL voice, right? That sort of testosterone-based behaviour can be quite exclusionary for females. We're starting to see the equivalent in all female leadership teams, where females are engaging in behaviour that excludes other females. So, what we're going to do now is we're going to watch our next little clip from Meet the Parents, and I'd like you to tell me which trigger is pulled in this clip.
I miss you too, Flapjack. Short stack coming up.
Where's my widow girl?
Hey, Mommy.
You look so beautiful.
Oh, so do you. Look at you. Oh, I'm sorry. Mom, Dad, this is Greg.
Hi, Greg. I'm Pam's father, Jack Burns.
Yeah, it's great to finally meet you.
And I'm Dina. Welcome to Oyster
thanks.
Bay. Great.
It's so comfortable. So that's why it's going like this, right? So allow yourself the understanding that you have these triggers get pulled, but just get better at managing the situation closer and closer and closer to the situation. You'll be surprised what actually comes out, because the beautiful thing about relationships is there's systems. With relationships, we've got inputs, processes and outputs. If you do you, boo, according to Charlotte, change your inputs, you don't need to change the processes, you don't need, and the outputs will actually change. All right. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go through that first one is a general sort of technique that you can use. I'm now going to give you one of the 9 strategies for developing resilience. And this one sometimes does feel like a one-arm push-up. Because what we're trying to do is we're trying to get that green bit of your brain to exert some control over the pink bit of your brain, prefrontal versus limbic. And that sometimes takes some conscious decision making. So the first strategy we have is called cab car. So I want you to imagine this situation. You have a colleague, a really, really painful colleague, who sabotages you again. You know, you have those really sort of acidic colleagues who sometimes make your life difficult. If you haven't had one, don't wait, they're coming. You know, they just make it really, really, really difficult, and they sabotage you again, you know, for their own self-interest, and it creates carnage. You have to go and do it. It's like, oh, are you seriously kidding me? So that's the challenge. The behaviour and emotion that obviously comes out of that. We're having some major issues. The behaviour and emotion that actually comes out of that, I can go back one, is one of these: sulk, complain, sadness, stress, anger. You may avoid them or you may attack them. Those behavioural responses are completely reasonable. It's important we understand that they're completely reasonable. Don't demonise yourself for having those behavioural responses. Demonise yourself for acting on them. Right? You can't stop that initial, oh, water, okay, but you can actually decide how you're going to respond. And we call this being in the cab, because when you're in the cab, you sit in the back seat and someone else is driving. So the challenge, you can't change the challenge. But what you can look at is what's the negative automatic thinking that is occurring between the challenge and the behaviour. And this is some examples, like, if only they would behave like a normal human being, is what you might think. It's their fault I can't do this. They are such a, insert insult here. Why can't I? You know, that's what we call this negative automatic thinking. Correct, not helpful. Because that negative automatic thinking then leads to the behavioural response of that. And when you're in the cab, you sit in the back seat and someone else is driving. The person who's driving is your amygdala, and it's pushing you into a fight or flight response. We want to get out of the cab and into the car. Because when we get into the car, the challenge is a challenge, but we're sitting in the front seat. We want to replace that automatic negative thinking with active thinking. And this is where it gets hard. This is normal part of working in healthcare, that I'm going to be working with a toxic individual. Hard, isn't it? It's a one-arm push-up. You want to be sitting there going, but there's such an, right? That's your brain. That's the easy way of thinking. That's the low road. This is the high road. The high road is going to lead to your levels of satisfaction and happiness. This is how you increase your happiness set point. Or you rephrase it to, well, I can still do X, Y, and Z. Or you could simply say, you know what? It gives me the opportunity to learn how to deal with toxic individuals because I'm going to have more of them in the future. The difference between cab versus car is when you're sitting in the cab, you are stagnating. You feel correct. You feel right. If you're doing a really great job, you'll be recruiting other people to your viewpoint. We call that a carcinogenic pod of dolphins. People all sitting there going, this is crap, rah, 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 right? Okay, because dolphins like to swim together. Okay, but they're actually dying whilst they're doing it. If you get out of that pod and you get into the car, what happens is you get a far more realistic response. You have a plan how you're going to deal with this person in the future. You're resolved to stick it out and you face into it directly. In the car, you get where you want to go faster. Far greater happiness. But be aware, it takes conscious thought and effort to get out of the cab and into the car. And sometimes we just don't wanna. We want to sit there going, but they are, putting it bluntly, a turd. Right? And it's okay to think that for a little while. That's normal. But if you are sitting there swimming in that, or if you see it in the long term, this sort of thinking becomes part of people's identity, you are only harming yourself. You are bumping into yourself and you're reducing your opportunities for happiness and satisfaction. So my eyeball, the reality is I'm blind in one eye. It was very, very, very disappointing. There's a number of things I can no longer do. And if I sat there thinking, why didn't that surgeon diagnose that undisclosed pressure, which they should. Pressure is a simple thing, and he's a world-beating surgeon. You know, why didn't he do this? Why didn't he do that? He's this, he's that, he's this. And then I could have gone down the path of suing him and I would have got 200 or 300K out of it. But I'm only harming myself. I'm only taking myself away from my life. You only get one life. Unless you believe in Buddhism, but even then you might come back as a goat. Right? Generally, this is it. Right? So get out of the cab and into the car and have a far happier, fulfilling, satisfying life where you get to skip through the tulips. Right. So out of the cab, into the car. Replace that automatic negative thinking with active thinking. All right, here we go. Here's what I want you to do. This is a situation. We'll do one of these situations and then we'll flip to questions. You bust your hump for a key stakeholder, client or patient. You give them everything. You give them the long hours. You call in favours to deliver whatever they want and they throw it back in your face. And you get that feeling it is never, ever good enough for them. What is the automatic thinking? What and insert insult here. These people are whatever. I always do that. I'm such an idiot. I'm never going to be able to do whatever now. Why do I bother in the first place? Fair, reasonable, possibly correct, not helpful. What's a more active way of thinking about it? I've learned something from it. Beautiful, yep.
Why am I so over-invested in this person? What's in it for me? Like, why have I gotten so tied up with it that I've given them all this extra work?
You're beating yourself up a little bit too much. We can make it simpler. It's unfortunately what we see from research, part of the female condition. Males often don't beat themselves up enough. What do we got? I did my best. Yeah, we can improve on that. That's still a little, go for it. Well, they're an annoying, terrible person. Yeah, that's resolving it, but this is the thought of that's sort of something you're going to do. It's good, but something you're going to do. This is the thought you can think to help yourself bounce through this situation, not get bogged down in the emotion. Go for it. Yes, this is an opportunity for improvement, or I can learn something, or it's a coaching moment, or this is going to set me up to deal with difficult people in the future. So if you simply make the decision, everything is an opportunity. That will move you to active thinking.
Let them own the problem.
That's what you're going to do. That's not what you're going to think. Right? There's a difference between thinking and doing. Yep.
I think everyone does things for their own reason.
Yes?
And then leave it at that. It's their reasons, then I look for my own reasons.
Beautiful. So you can say that's his or her story, and that helps you to move on. So the way you know when you've nailed active thinking, the emotional reaction disappears, you stand up tall and you go, okay, and you move through. Conscious decision making. All right. Yeah, go for it.
Doesn't that moment need a certain amount of mental health?
Yes.
Between the response and the active thinking, like, doesn't it assume that you're a person who isn't in hyperarousal?
Yes, when your brain is flooded, it's hard to do. It gets better and better and better. So this technique is based on, from a psychological terms, normal behaviour. It doesn't work as well with a clinical population from a psychological disorder perspective. Okay, so what have we got? One more question? Yeah, one more question at most. If there's no other questions? All right, so this is where I'll finish up. Resilience and happiness, as it says there, is a decision. I've given you one technique. It's your decision to decide to be happy and resilient each day, but that decision is not always easy. Don't be afraid to ask other people for help to make those decisions. All right, if you want to find out more, our website's just socialintelligence.com.au. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please thank Luke Ross.